Good evening to all. Welcome to the third webinar for RICS APC current and potential candidates. I am going to conduct these two competencies in two sessions today and coming Saturday. If the time permits, I will run through a few questions after the end of the second session. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Sian Adam Lebbe, working with the semi-government organization in Qatar. I believe you are all familiar with RICS APC process. However, let me recap the process in brief. The RICS assessments aims to assess that you are competent to carry out the work as a qualified quantity surveyor. The RICS competencies are also based upon attitudes and behaviors. The competencies are presented in a generic way so that they can apply to different areas of practice and geographical locations. It is important that you interpret them within the context of your own area of practice, specialty, and location. Each competency is defined at 3 levels of attainment. You must reach the required level in a logical progression and in successive stages. Level 1, knowledge and understanding. Level 2, application of knowledge. Level 3, reason, advice, depth and synthesis of technical knowledge and its implementation. The competencies are in 3 distinct categories. Mandatory, this is common to all pathways and mandatory for all candidates. Technical core, the primary skills of your chosen pathways. Technical optional, selected as additional skills requirement for your pathway. Today we are going to discuss about contract practice and contract administration. You should be thorough with your standard form of contract or at least one standard form of contract. Today's discussion will be based on FIDIC 1999 Red Book and Qatar context, because I am going to go through some legal legislations, so that will be based on the Qatar context. Now let us move to the pathway requirements. You can see here contract practice, core competency. You should provide your answer up to level 3. And also, if you have selected contract administration as an optional competency, you should provide your answer up to level 2. I have plotted both competencies in the table. You can see in the screen. So the contract practice under core competency, the contract administration under the optional core competency. Now let us move on to the core competency, contract practice. You can see the example of likely knowledge, skills and experience at each levels are listed here. So level 1, level 2, level 3. The level 1 says demonstrate knowledge and understanding of the various forms of contract used in the construction industry and your area of business. Level 2, apply your knowledge of the use of various standard forms of contract at project level, including the implication and obligation that apply to the parties to the contract. Level 3, provide evidence of reason, advice, prepare and present reports on the selection of the appropriate form of contract and warranties for your chosen procurement route. This should include advising on the most appropriate contractual procedure at the various stages of the construction of other contract. Now let us move to the optional core competency, contract administration. I think Sandesh, your video is on. Okay. Contract administration. If you have selected contract administration as an optional competency, you can see the example of likely knowledge, skills, and experience at each level and listed here. See the same. Level 1, demonstrate knowledge and understanding of the contractual, legislative, and statutory terminology, requirements, and of a construction contract. Level 2, implement administrative procedures necessary to run a construction contract. Level 3, advise on the administrative procedures necessary for the smooth running of a construction contract, including document control techniques and systems, meeting and reporting procedures. Now let us move to the study checklist. You can see here contract practice, level 3, principle of contract law, legislation, current case law, standard forms of main and subcontract, roles and responsibilities of the parties, assignment and novation, third-party rights, letter of intent, performance security, insurances, advance payment, interim valuation and payment provision, material on and off site, fluctuation, retention, change procedure, valuing, change, events, extension of time, claim and loss and expenses, dispute avoidance and resolution, name and nominated subcontractor, sectional completion, partial possession, design portion, performance specified works, determination, final account, completion, liquidated and delayed damages, defects, liability, rectification period, construction, technology, and I don't know why they have included in the construction technology because there is a separate pathway. However, you should know the complete knowledge of the construction. Now let us move to the principle of contract law. The next one also, contract administration also almost similar to the contract practice, okay? And these are, in this section, the competencies are broken down into a list of topics to help candidate to make sure they have covered everything that is appropriate to their journey through the pathways, competencies. However, this is not exhaustive, which means this is not a complete list, okay? But these are the competencies they have listed, the study checklist. Now let us move to the principle of contract law. You should be able to define what a contract is. A contract can be defined as a legally binding agreement between two or more parties. This is a contract definition. A contract can be defined as a legally binding agreement between two or more parties. It is legally binding means that if any party to the agreement fails to honor one or more of its provision, they are liable to another party for breach of contract. The consequence of the breach of contract is that the innocent party can obtain legal remedy. This usually takes the form of an award of damages to compensate them for the loss which they have suffered as a result of that breach. So they have given the, what is the meaning of the legal binding? Now let us move to the next item, the requirements for the formation of the legally binding contract. The following requirements are necessary. there must be an agreement between the parties. And the agreement made between the parties must be certain and final. The parties must intend the agreement to be legally binding. The agreement must either be contained in a deed or be supported by consideration. Let us look at that one. Essential of valid contract agreement. The legal test to be applied in order to determine whether an agreement has been made between two parties. That is offer and acceptance. Somebody has to offer, the other person should make unconditional acceptance. So we have to be very careful. It should be unconditional acceptance. The second one, intention to create legal relations. An agreement does not constitute a contract if the parties do not intend the agreement to be legally binding. So business and commercial agreement, social, domestic and family agreements. These are the essentials of valid contract. The third one, consideration. Something of value is called consideration, promise. A further fundamental requirement for the formation of contract is that the agreement must either be contained in a deed or be supported by consideration. Or he has to give some promise. For example, if you are constructing the building, the client, the employer will say, okay, if you construct this house, I will pay this much. That is the consideration because he is giving a promise to the other party. Contractual capacity. A contract which has been created correctly may not be enforceable by against a party to a contract because that party lacked the capacity to enter into that contract. The minors cannot enter into the contract. So the person who should be matured, and there are some limitation for the ages, some countries 18, some countries 16, some countries 21. These are the mature people, the contractual capacity, the minors under 16 or under 18, that is depend on the countries, they cannot enter into the contract. In this part of the world, the last one, good faith and fair deal. We have the Qatar Civil Code, the article number 172. In UAE, that is a different number. I think so, 234, something like that in UAE. But in this part of the world, the Middle East countries, they have added this one. This should be essential of the valid contract, good faith and fair deal. The next term of the contract. Contractual terms may be express terms and implied terms. Express term means which is formulated by the parties. Whatever we are agreeing, we will put into the document. That is called express term. Some of them are implied, one which is not formulated by the parties, but which the law as it were reads into the contract. I have given two examples. One is decennial liability. Some contract documents, they will not mention about the decennial liability. It means you don't have that obligation. It doesn't mean that you don't have that obligation to provide this decennial liability. You should provide this decennial liability based on the Qatar Civil Code article 711 to 715. They speak about the decennial liability. What do you mean by decennial liability? Designer and contractor are jointly liable for the defects threatening the stability of the building for 10 years from the date of delivery. Even in Dubai also, this is 10 years from the date of delivery means the completion, date of completion, TOC, from the TOC date. The next one, good faith and fair deal. These are implied terms as per Qatar Civil Code article. Now let us move to the other item. Construction contract should address the following. First, define the rights, obligation and liabilities of each party. Each party means employer, contractor and engineer. The employer, he has to cooperate, site possession, access and right of way. Contractor, he has to execute the work in accordance with the contract. That is it. These are their basic rights, obligation and liabilities. These are the obligations, okay? And the contract document, the contract should define the rights and obligation and liabilities of the each party. Then only they will execute their works as per that contract terms. And also the procedures to be followed for the controlling the contract. Management of the quality of the work, quality control procedure, time frame, payment, changing the contract, the change management procedure, assignment and subletting on larger projects, insurances, damage for breach of contract, dispute resolution project. These are the minimum should be addressed in the contract, and they have to define the procedure to be followed for the controlling of the contract. Now let us move to the documents forming the contract. Contract agreement. Contracts means the uppercase C. Contracts mean the set of documents, list of documents, different list of the various documents which comprise the contract between the parties. You may notice that previously we have defined the contract definition, which is starting from the lowercase c. While you are writing, you have to be very careful while writing this contract and contract document. That is contract, lowercase c. Contract means a legally binding agreement between two or more parties. That is agreement, legally binding agreement. Uppercase C, contract documents mean this is set of documents. Okay. Now we'll see, because I have taken this one for the priority of document as per the FIDIC 99. We are discussing this one based on the FIDIC 99. If you are not following the FIDIC 91, if you are not aware of that FIDIC 91, you should be thorough your contract. Because there are a lot of people attending this webinar in various parts of the world, because they should be thorough their contract, your contract, okay? Contract agreement. This is a formal record of the agreement between the parties. Generally, 2 pages, contract agreements, okay? This is a formal record of the formal record of the agreement between the parties. The next one, letter of acceptance. This is defined as letter of formal acceptance signed by the employer. This is defined as letter of formal acceptance signed by the employer. Letter of tender. This which letter of tender including appendix to tender, addendum and etc. This is a letter from the contractor by which he submits his offer for the works in response to the employer invitation to tender. So letter of acceptance means letter of formal acceptance signed by the employer. Letter of tender means this is a letter from the contractor by which he submits his offer for the works in response to the employer invitation to the tender. The next one, condition of contract, particular condition and general condition. These conditions form central element to the contract. Particular and general, these conditions form central element to the contract. They are the principal source for the rights, obligation, liabilities of the contract, because here only they will define their rights, obligation and liabilities. General condition of contract which are deemed to be suitable in all cases, and particular condition of contract in which parties can specify project specific issues case by case basis. Generally, in the general condition, they will give how to amend that general condition. So we call it as a particular condition. that particular condition means that will be suit for that particular specific project. If we want to change something based on that type of the project, for the specific project, it is case by case, which does not mean the same particular condition should be applicable to another project, the same client. No, it is depend on the type of contract, type of project, location and all. So they will suit their requirement as per the project basis. They are specific to that particular project. So specification, this document, so collection of documents set out the technical requirement for the works and as well as ancillary matters relating to the execution of the works. This is called specification. Basically in this specification, they will define what are the technical requirements for that particular project. Drawings, these set out the design of the work. So in the drawings, they will these set out the design of the work. Schedules, so I have given the examples. What will be included under the schedule? The price BOQ, schedule of rates and prices, schedule of payment. Is there any schedule of, because there will be some milestone payment also. So they will fill, the contractor will fill that schedule of payments and they will submit with the tender. This is called schedules, the day work schedule. These document entitled the completed by the contractor and submitted with the letter of tender. Any other documents forming part of the contract, for example, soil report. This soil report generally the employer will issue with the tender to the all tenderers. Now let us see. Okay. Now we are going to, before moving that other chapter, I will just ask a few possible questions. Why the condition of contracts are required? So why we require the condition of contract are required? So these are the possible questions. Okay. What are the key different documents between tender and contract? Because in this letter of tender, the tender document, there are two documents will be added to that contract document. One is contract agreement or letter of acceptance. Letter of acceptance, because some employer, they will not issue the letter of agreement. They will issue letter of acceptance which will contain all the agreement content. Some people, they will not issue the letter of acceptance. They will completely, they will send the contract agreement, that 2 pages, which will contain all the letter of acceptance as well. It's not necessary this both should be there. Some contract document I have seen, both of them are there. The contract agreement as well as the letter of acceptance. So these are the questions they are asking in the APC. What are the key different documents between tender and contract? So these two documents are different. One is a letter of contract agreement. Another one is post-tender clarification. Because once we submit the tender, after that, if the employer requires some clarification, they will issue, that is called post-tender clarification. Then the contractor will reply to that post-tender clarification. Later on, while we are compiling to the contract agreement, the post-tender clarification also will be added to that contract agreement, contract document. Here, another one is a tender document, contract document issued for the construction. There is another one. While in the negotiation process, some contract, the employer will say, you have to include this item. In writing they will give, but they will not give any drawings. Okay, you have to include item, but we will give some amount of money. Then that item you will not see in the tender document. Then they will make the contract. After that, while issuing the issued for construction drawing, whatever they have discussed in the contract document, that will be included in the issued for construction. So while we are doing the variation, you have to compare that issued for construction and later on issued for the revisions. So you have to be very careful. Now let us move to the legislation. Here I am going to speak about the legislation based in Qatar context, as I am working for the company in Qatar. I am residing here, so I am going to talk about the Qatar council structure. You should be familiar with the legislation of the country where you are working or residing. The Supreme Judiciary Council oversees 3 courts in Qatar. These are the court structure. Even this is the same structure in UAE as well. Court of first instance consists of the criminal court, the civil court, and family court, and the execution court. Court of appeal, the second stage, responsible for deciding appeals filed against a judgment issued by the lower courts and comprises 3 members. Court of cassation. These are the 3 structures in Qatar. There is one query. This should be interactive session. Is letter of tender submit along with the tender bid, or like you said, as a response to the tender invitation? Why I ask, it includes appendix to tender, addendum and all. Is letter of tender submit along with the tender bid? Oh, no, this should be letter of tender submitting with the tender bid. You will submit this letter of tender with the tender bid, the form of agreement. The contractor will sign the first page, these are the amount, okay? And he will submit all the documents, because in the ITT instruction to tender, they will very clearly specify what needs to be submitted while submitting your tender offer, the tender bid. So based on that, this will be included, all the appendix to tender, because during the tender procedure, if the contractor is having any query or clarification, they will prepare the tender query. And the employer, engineer, they will respond to that tender queries. While you are submitting your tender package, you have to submit including that one as well. Okay. Now let us move to the current case law. This is not, okay. This is not applicable to Qatar context. If you are living in Europe, please keep reading the recent publications. Okay, this is mostly for these European countries. I have defined what is case law and common law as well. Case law is a collection of past legal decisions written by the courts and similar tribunals in the course of deciding cases, in which the law was analyzed using these cases to resolve ambiguities for deciding current cases. These past decisions are called case law or precedent. Common law is a body of unwritten law based on legal precedents established by the courts. Common law influences the decision-making process in unusual cases where the outcome cannot be determined based on the existing statutes or written rule of law. Actually, this is not applicable to not only Qatar, Middle East context, but if you are living in Europe, you should read the recent publication from the law updates. Now let us move to the standard form of the contract. There is one more query. Can you clarify if there is any changes to the particular condition of contract after signing in the contract agreement? No way, they cannot do, because this the condition of contract, they cannot change. Okay, contract agreement, basically the content of contract agreement, if we can see, they will agree the amount for the acceptance, letter of acceptance, agreement, and if there are any, for example, the performance security program, and they will give the important activities. The next activities they will list it in the contract agreement. Basically, you can see in the contract agreement, these are the items. This is nothing to do with the particular conditions. Let us move on to the standard form of contract. There are several sources of standard contract forms in use, but in the main avenues are here in Qatar Petroleum Contract, QP contract, PWF contract, Qatar DR contract, FIDIC, JCT, it is in UK, Europe, ACA contract, ICE condition of contract, GC work series, Institute of Chemical Engineers, New Engineer, NEC contract. So you should be familiar what are the available standard form of contract where you are working or residing. You should be familiar your contract, your standard form of contract. Now let us look at the FIDIC forms. Okay, there is another query. You have mentioned tender appendix. What are the factors should be included within it? Actually, appendix to tender means the key information they will mention in that document. Basically, this will be a single page. The key information they will list it. For example, LD this much. Okay, and they will give who is the engineer and defect liability period, 365 days, 400 days, like that. The key information they will list it into the appendix to the tender. That is called appendix to the tender. What about the case law in Sri Lanka? I believe in Sri Lanka it is a mixed common law and case law. I'm not sure about that one. Better you search in the Google and find it. Okay. Now let us look at the FIDIC form. Forms are very popular for international projects and many are available in range of languages. The most popular forms are Condition of Contract for Works, Civil Engineering Construction, known as Red Book. Fourth edition of this form with amendments was published in 1990. So we call it as a FIDIC fourth edition 1987. They made the amendment in 1992. The next one, Condition of Contract for Construction 99 version, the Rainbow editions. Condition of Contract for Design, Build and Turnkey, known as Orange Book. Sometimes they may ask these questions, what are the Rainbow edition of a FIDIC family? Like that. So you should be familiar, you should be aware of these things. So that is the reason I have included in this slides. So you just go through this one. The next one, short form of contract, the Green Book. These conditions of contract are recommended for engineering and building work for relatively small capital value. Basically, they use it in the villa projects or FFNE, small value projects. However, depending on the type of work and the circumstances, the condition may also be suitable for contracts of much greater value. The form is intended for fairly simple or repetitive work, the maintenance work as well, or work of short duration, framework arrangement without the need for specialist subcontracts. It may also be suitable for contracts that include or comprise contractor design, civil engineering, building, mechanical and related work. Basically, the short form of the Green Book, we use it for the short form of contract. The next one, plant and design bill contract, yellow book. This contract is recommended for the provision of electrical and mechanical plant and for the design and execution of the building engineering works where the contractor design and provides in accordance with the employer requirements. Plant and or other works that include any combination of civil, mechanical, electrical or construction works. There is another query. If there is a conflict between acoustic report and drawing, specification and contractor forgot to identify during bidding stage, then is contractor responsible to provide as per acoustic report when the same is not reflecting in the drawing and specification. For these questions, actually they mention priority of the documents. So you have to check what are the priorities in your document. For example, if it is in one document, there is a two difference. Let's say in one drawing, they have given 30 mm marble, 3 centimeter marble. The same the set of drawings, they have given another location, they mentioned 20 mm marble. Okay, but this is here the contra preferendum rule will apply. So first you have to check priority of the document for this question. The second, if it is the same document, it will be applied contra preferendum rule. There is another, is there any defined value to use short form of contract? If I am not mistaken, they have mentioned $500 million or something. $500,000 or something. Okay, I am not sure about this one. I have noticed in the FIDIC website. Just please check and make sure that is the value. They have given one value, $500,000 US or 5,000 something like that. Please check it. Letter of award and letter of intent would be considered as part of contract. I'll come to the letter of intent. Letter of award is a binding document. That is the legally binding contract. Letter of acceptance, letter of award. Letter of intent is a, if the employer intention to enter into the contract in a future date, he is giving the intention. Basically, once the contractor received the purpose of issuing the LOI, he will make the setup for the arrangement. He will call the supplier, subcontractor. He will say, we have received the letter of intent. We will let you know in due course, but these are the long lead items. So these are the materials we require. Still your quotation is very like that. The contractor will negotiate with his, discuss with his supplier and subcontractor. He will arrange his own setup. He can prepare the programs. He can prepare the methodologies. Okay. And also, because this is a little bit different, I have seen in Dubai, there are some letter of intent, we executed the work. That is, in that letter of intent, content of that letter of intent also valid. Because they will mention the heading letter of intent, but the content will be, looks like a legally binding agreement. So that is depend on the case work. But generally, letter of intent means the employer intention to enter into the contract in a future date. So he is giving just indication. We are going to append like this, something like that. Okay, we will look into that under the letter of intent. Is all designable projects are prepared based on the yellow book? Yes. Because if you see the first one, the orange, what do you call? The orange book, design, build and turnkey. Okay, turnkey means turn to the key. the employer, the contractor, the employer will not interfere. He will give his employer requirement and everything. End of the day, the contractor will give the key, including FF&E. He will fix everything. Short form of contract can be used without engineer, consultant, direct agreement with the employer. You can see here, it is mentioned here. These conditions of contract are recommended for engineering and building works of relatively small capital value. However, depending on the type of work and the circumstances, the condition may also be small capital. However, depending on the type of work and the circumstances, the condition may also be suitable for contract of much greater value. The form is intended for fairly simple or repetitive work or work short duration, without the need for specialist subcontracts. It may also be suitable for contracts that include wholly comprised contractor design, civil engineering, building, mechanical, electrical. Your question is, short form of contract can be used without engineer consult or direct agreement with the employer. Yes. The next one, there are a few queries actually. We will finish these queries and we'll move on to the other subject. Is letter of tender only the letter that is enclosed along with the contractor's tender bid, or it comprises all of the documents? It comprises all of the documents. Okay. In the ITT, instruction to tender, they will define while submitting your letter of tender, what are the documents you have to submit? Because some clients, they are telling no need to submit all the documents. Some people, they are saying whatever we issued during the tender, you have to stamp and sign and submit back to us. Is letter of intent legally binding? No. There is another query, is letter of intent legally binding? No, it is not legally binding. What is difference between lump sum and remeasurable contract in terms of preparing monthly interim valuation and final payment valuation of the project? We will look into that. For example, if we start a plaster activity based on signed and approved lump sum contract and quantities higher the BOQ comparison to site. On contractor claim, full payment of plaster activity in final valuation based on the BOQ will be obliged to pay based on the lump sum contract. Basically, lump sum contract, the quantity responsibility is lying with the contractor. He has taken the full risk of the quantity. While pricing, he is submitting his tender, okay, he should make sure that quantity is satisfied. Okay, so if there are any quantity variance in the lump sum contract, the employer does not need to pay that for that quantity variance, even if it is higher or lesser, it doesn't matter. Because contractor has taken full responsibility of the quantity responsibility. We are using the letter of conditional award, LOCA. What is the difference between award and conditional of tender? Actually, this one, there is another one, letter of interim agreement, LOIA. And the same way you are here, you are asking the question, we are using the letter of conditional award, LOCA. What is different between award and conditional award? So we have to see this is what is the content of that letter of conditional offer. So based on that one only we can judge. We can comment, not judge, we can comment, because it is depend on the case by case scenario. So let us move to the next question. Is letter of intent a contract or agreement, or it is need to be qualified? Letter of intent, as I said, that the definition is the employer intention to enter into a contract in a future date. This is the definition of letter of intent. Actually, we will look into that. There is another query. What are the major difference between ASCAL general condition of contract, Qatar Petroleum condition of contract, and FIDIC Red Book? You should check actually, because we cannot memorize these things. Okay, each and every standard form of contract. If you are living in Qatar, you have to take main condition of conditions. Okay, you should compare what is Haskell says, what is QP contract says, what is FIDIC Red Book says. Like that, you have to compare. For example, this time notices. Okay, so conditional precedent, like that you have to see. You have to compare with the standard form of contract where you are living or working. In a design and build project, if contractor proposes technical specification and propose finishes along with the tender submission, is it legally binding upon award of contractor? We have to provide as per the clause fit for purpose. Even though it is a deviation when compared to contractor consideration, how the contractor can justify legally. In this design and build contract, basically one document called employer requirement, statement of employer requirement. In that statement of employer requirement or employer requirement, the employer will define these are my requirements. Based on that, the contractor will submit his offer. Okay, so that is depend on the document. And the design and build contract also, it says fit for purpose. So you have to read your document carefully, because some practical problems. I can see this question. The next question is, can owner regulate after issuance of LOI? Yes, because he has given the intention only. They can owner regulate after the issuance of LOI. Okay. Here I want to say something. For example, if the contractor carried out some work based on the letter of intent, after that the employer notifying to the contractor, I am not going to move forward with this letter of intent. So if the contractor go to the courts, okay, the courts will award that whatever he has executed based on the quantum merit basis. Okay, quantum merit basis. We will look into that under the claims, quantum merit basis. So the court will award that the contract employer has to pay for that quantum merit. Whatever he has carried out, executed, the employer has to pay. There are another condition in that same. For example, let's say the employer has given the letter of intent, the contractor has cleared the site preparation. He removed that grass and all. So, end of the day, the employer is taking benefits. So, employer has to pay. For example, based on that letter of intent, he prepared some, he prepared some design. Okay, he prepared some design, and which is not acceptable to the employer. So in this scenario, employer does not want to pay because he is not going to benefit that design. I think you might understood this one. Okay, there are two conditions. One, if the employer is benefiting, if he is benefiting, he has to pay based on the quantum merit basis. If the employer is not benefiting, he doesn't want to pay because he has given the letter of intent, which is not legally binding. He has given the intention to enter into the contract in a future dates. So you have to see that scenarios. The next question is, FIDIC Red Book is mainly made for lump sum or remeasured contract. Basically, this is remeasured contract. So the employer is changing to lump sum. If they want to do lump sum, this is also one of the possible questions. What are the clauses needs to be changed if the employer wants to change the remeasured contract into lump sum contract, which means that he has to concentrate on that measurement clauses, because that is given approximate quantity or estimated quantity in the FIDIC document. So if you want to change it to lump sum, he has to change that measurement clauses. The next question, if the employer terminate the main contractor, it is automatically terminate the subcontractor. We will look into that under the termination. Okay, next question, submit a proposal for acceptance. I didn't understand the question. Let us move to the next question. Can a lump sum also be fit for purpose? So is there any prerequisite to fit for the purpose contract? No. Lump sum is different, fit for purpose is different. You should differentiate both these two, the glossary of the terms. These terms you should differentiate. Lump sum is different, fit for purpose is different. Let us move to the next question. But when you are instructing a contractor to execute works on an intent, there must be a defined end amount for the contractor not to exceed. That is depend on the content of the letter of intent. Let us move to the next question. What conditions do we amend mainly when we are making a lump sum contract in FEDIC Red Book? Measurement clauses. The next one, the fluctuation. These two clauses should be amended. How we can justify employer is benefiting? I didn't understand that question. Okay, let us move to the study checklist. EPC, turnkey contract, engineer, procure and construction. Generally, the EPC contract for this, what he calls a substation, cooling plant, these are the projects. Normally, they will give the EPC contract, engineer, procure and construct. Known as a silver book. This form is designed for project where certainty of price and certainty of the completion dates are of extreme importance, and where the contractor is required to design, procure and construct the works. Example, build, operate, transfer projects. The requirements of such projects typically require the contractor to assume responsibility for a much wider range of risks than would conventionally be the case. This form is therefore suitable for projects, particularly electrical and mechanical or process plant orientated, where the project is required on a turnkey basis. So if you want more further details, you just visit FEDIC website. I have given here that FEDIC website. You just visit, they have defined everything. The previously one guy asked what is the value of that short form of contract. I remember they have mentioned some value over there. Okay. Now let us move to the possible questions. These are the possible questions. Generally, they ask in the APC panel interviews. What are the major differences between FEDIC 87 and 99? So here I have listed, these are the differences. You can read, which is self-explanatory, because these are the main key takeaways from this FEDIC 87 and 99. One guy, he asked what are the difference between the ASCAL contract. Like that, you have to compare actually, okay? You have to prepare this non-standard form of contract and you have to compare what are the difference, what are the major changes. You have to take the major clauses instead of going for the number of clauses and all. You have to take the major clauses. So here I have given in FEDIC 87, engineer is impartial, whereas in FEDIC 99, engineer is employer agent. So no impartiality. Like the way I have written, you have to answer, because this is the prototype, the possible question they are asking, and the candidate also expect you to provide the answer like this way. You have to compare and contrast. And also the next one, why should we use standard forms? So I have given the answer, you can see, balance risk allegation, time threshold for possible flows, familiar by all parties, less disputes, legal costs minimized, ready to use. So these are the reasons we are using for this standard forms, the FIDIC, because this is readily available. And also they might ask, what are the difference between your contract and FIDIC contract? For example, if it is ASCAL contract or PWO contract in Qatar, okay, or in Dubai, Nakil contract, they might ask what are the difference between your contract and FIDIC. Okay, you should compare and contrast between your contract and the standard form of contract. Let us move on to the roles and responsibilities of the parties. There are a few questions. Let us see. There's one question. In remeasurable contract, the quantity taken in a net quantity or the total quantity means including wastage of material. You read preamble. Okay, based on the preamble and the principle of measurement. Okay, but which one they are using? You have to because this is conjunction with the standard of the method of measurement. There is another query. I saw one clause in the contract that if variation exceeds 20% from the contract value, lump sum, the contractor eligible to apply new rate even for existing BOQ items. Is it correct based on the FIDIC? In FIDIC 1987, if you want to deviate the rates, you have to give a notice within 14 days based on the clause 52.2. If I am not mistaken, clause 52.2. If that is the case, you have to give a notice within 14 days. This 20% rate, it is a different. 20% is under recovery and over recovery. Okay, these two are different actually. If it is 20% exceeds the variation, you cannot change the rate. Okay, this is under recovery and over recovery. That is different, and this is different. There is another query. What is a major difference between FIDIC yellow book and FIDIC silver book? Actually, you have to compare with that two books. Just download that two books and just read it. Just compare and prepare the compare and contrast. The major clauses, then you will find it. The next question, if there is a mistake in the quantities in BOQ, quantities found to be less in the BOQ for an item in a lump sum contract, can that quantity be revised down and therefore the cost in the post contract? If it is a lump sum contract, no. Because lump sum contract, contractor has taken the risk and responsibility of the quantities. If it is a remeasured, you can claim based on the actual quantity. If it is a lump sum contract, no way. There is one more query. The project has been suspended. They mentioned in the suspension letter, dewatering has to be continued. Contract is lump sum FIDIC 1987. In the BOQ, we don't have the item dewatering only. It is mentioned included. In the BOQ, we don't have an item dewatering only. It is mentioned included. So do we claim for the day of dewatering cost since the project suspended in almost 4 months now? The project has been suspended. They mentioned in the suspension letter, dewatering has to be continued. Contract is lump sum as FIDIC 1987. In the BOQ, we don't have an item. We don't have item dewatering only. It is mentioned included. How do we claim for the day of dewatering? Actually, you have to give the breakdown of that dewatering. Generally, in some contract, they will say you have to provide the lump sum amount, not included, lump sum items. You have to give the breakdown within 28 days, not included lump sum items. Okay. If it is included, you have to provide the breakdown. Based on that, you can claim. The next question is engineer's determination not mandatory in FIDIC 99? Prior to referring any dispute to DAB, because here the FIDIC 99 engineer is he is not impartial because he's an employer agent. But in FIDIC 87, engineer is an impartial. This is what we have seen. Here you can see the first one. FIDIC 87 engineer is impartial, whereas FIDIC 99 engineer is employer agent. Yes. The next question is, in my project, one of person from client side requested to include insurance, advance payment bond, performance bond in the contract document and some of the direct contract package. Is it okay to include them in the contract document? Cost consultant are deployed under 2.2 as engineer representative. We will look into that under the bonds. I will discuss this one. The next question, whether we follow now FIDIC 99, latest version, second edition, FIDIC 2000. As I said, today's discussion and the coming Saturday discussion will be based on the FIDIC 99 Red Book and Qatar context. Because I will refer some legislations. So this is not FIDIC 2017. This is not based on the 2017. Okay. What are the differences between the next question? Standard form of contract and bespoke form of contract. Generally, the bespoke form of contract, the employer, whatever he wants to change based on his requirement, okay, how he wants to transfer the risk to the contractor, he will do the bespoke. That you have to do the compare and contrast based on the FIDIC standard form and bespoke contract. They might ask these questions. Very good question. FIDIC, the next one. What is the key points to be considered while preparing subcontractor agreements? I mentioned earlier what should address in the agreements. One is you have to define the rights, obligation, and liabilities of each parties. And also I mentioned there are a few items. For example, the time frame, the payment, and the dispute resolution. These are the things needs to be included in the subcontractor agreement. We checked in the slide. FIDIC Red Book now is issued the latest version in the year 2017. What is the major difference between main contractor and subcontractor? Subcontractor, we will look into that. Still we are looking FIDIC 99. Okay, few questions are okay, let us move to the next checklist, the roles and responsibility of the parties, client, employer, owner. Now let us, the client, also known as the employer or building owner, is the person or organization that commissioned the works and subsequently pays for it. The main duties of the client on all construction projects are ensure that suitable management arrangements are made for that project. Health and safety responsibilities. The client must provide information regarding the project, site, and other relevant issues to the designers and contractors on all projects. Select and appoint competent and resource designer and contractor. The client shall establish arrangements for confirming the adequate cooperation and coordination between all members of the project team. engineer, employer representative, employee's agent, project manager, contract administrator, quantity surveyor, carried out many and various functions which in general terms can be said to fall into one or more of the following categories. Administration and management. These are the roles and responsibilities of the listed parties. The engineer, employer representative, employee agent, project management, contract administration, quantity survey. They will administration and management. The design, supervision. The giving of instruction and instructing or approving a variation, valuation and certification, determination of claims, including the contractor's claim for additional payment and extension of time. Okay, let us see the contractor, the roles and responsibilities. The traditional procedure is to appoint a main contractor who is in charge of the whole job and coordinates the work of the various subcontractors. A contractor is anyone who directly employs or engages construction workers or manages construction work. Contractors, therefore, having an important role in planning, managing, and monitoring their work to ensure any risk are controlled. I just want to mention you, as I said, we will look into all the questions at the end of the session too, because I have to run through these slides because I have a few more slides. I'm a little bit afraid if I am go one by one this question, we cannot finish it today. You keep your questions and we will run through on the end of the second session. It means next Saturday, we will run through all your questions. Let us finish this, the theory part, okay? Then later on, the next session, the second session, we'll run through all your questions. Okay. Now let us move to the subcontractor. The main contractor may sublet parts of his work to others for the following reasons. Lack of continuity of the particular type of work, making it uneconomic to keep the necessary skilled labor or purchase specialized equipment. It may be cheaper because of higher productivity resulting from closer supervision in all small subcontracting firms, especially where there is a working principle. It reduces the main contractor risk in that he merely adds his profit and attendance to the subcontractor rates. There are some financial advantage in that payment to supplier subcontractors made much later than would be necessary if the main contractor were to do with his own men. I will just brief you in a nutshell. Generally, in some contractors, for example, where I worked in Dubai, basically they will do concrete works only, okay? Because they have their own laborers, our laborers, they will deploy for the concrete works, especially for the concrete works and housekeeping works. And they will give other items for subcontractors. For example, they will hire the labor supply for the block work, okay? But the material they will provide. But labor supply from the another supplier, labor supplier for the block work, plaster, like that, they will give the supply contract. And another contractor, they call it a domestic contractor for the false ceiling works, okay? Because they are not specialized for that works, or they don't have the skilled labors, the first one, okay? They don't have the skilled labors. So there are a few domestic subcontractors which they are specialized for that false ceiling work. So they will give that work to them and simply they will add their rate into the our price BOQ. And a specialized subcontractor for this MEP works, lift work, because they are not specialized for that work. So they will hire for this MEP works, lift works like the aluminium works like that. So this is the simple explanation for this subcontract. Subcontractor responsibilities. Maintain frequent communication with the main contractors. And also as per FIDIC, if they want to give the subcontract, they should get the approval from the employer. If it is a named contractor, which means they will provide, the employer, they will give some set of document that is called preferred vendor list. Okay. For example, you can buy this tiles from this company, X company, Y company, like that, they will give some name. If it is mentioned in that document, the preferred vendor says, no need to get the approval, okay, just you can notify to them, okay, approval or consent. It is depend on the contract. You have to be thorough in your contract. So subcontractor responsibility: maintain frequent communication with main contractor, adhere to policies and procedures, participate in safety events, provide PPE for the workers, personal protective equipment, ensure equipment is safe, report safety hazard, report incidents. Let us move to the next checklist: assignment and novation. Assignment means one party to a contract transfer the only rights to a third party while keeping the liabilities. Here I have given two examples. You can see in the screen. One party to a contract transfer only the rights to a third party while keeping the liabilities. For example, collateral warranties from subcontractor, supplier to end user by the employer or client. Let's say if they are buying from the Yoko brand, they will have a collateral agreement. Okay, the supplier has to give it to end user. The second one, real estate company. For example, let's say we can take our tenancy contract. We are going through, most of them are going through the real estate company. What he will do on behalf of the client, okay, he will do everything, but liabilities with the other party. Next one, novation. You can read. Mechanism to transfer all rights and liabilities by one party to a third party who will replace the original party in the contract. Require the agreement of all three parties involved. For example, dewatering contract from enabling contractor to building contractor. If they are going for the novation agreement, that should be mentioned in the tender documents, the first. It should be in the ITT, instruction to tender, okay? In the later on, we will go with the novation. The example I have given here, dewatering, for example, some employers, before giving the main building works, they will do the piling works, the enabling works, okay? Then straight away they will award to the piling contractor, specialized for the piling. They will give it to a piling contractor. While he is doing the piling works, he has to establish the dewatering. And in the tender document, the main building tender document, the employer will say the already piling is a progress, and these are the dewatering contractor, and they will give the address and everything, okay? So the tenderer, he will send the inquiry to that same guy, okay, because he already established his system in that particular site, and he will get the rates for the rental charges, the high charges, okay, and he will include into the tender. So here, once he awarded the main building contract, that dewatering contractor, let's say if the piling contractor X, if he appointed that dewatering contract, then that dewatering the X, he will not have any liabilities. Straight away that will be transferred to that main contractor Y. So he has to continue with the payment and everything, because his liability is over. Once he transferred to the main contractor, his liability is over. This is called novation. Let us move on to the third party rights, legislation, collateral warranties. Privity of contract. The doctrine of privity of contract states that only the parties to a contract can sue on that contract. This has always caused problems when the contract has been entered into for the benefit of a third party. That third party could not sue to enforce the obligation, only the contracting parties could do this. This is called privity of contract. The next one, collateral warranties. Collateral warranty is the warranty provided by the subcontractor supplier under the main contractor, which allow the employer to directly deal with the subcontractor supplier in case of defective materials or works. As I said, for example, if the supplier for the AC, the split AC, let's say Yoko or Mitsubishi, something like that. So he will have a collateral agreement between that supplier Yoko to end user, employer. This is called collateral warranties. This is one of the possible questions they are asking in the APC penalty. The contracts rights of third party, actually this is in Europe only. In this part of the world, it is not applicable. Let us move on to the letter of intent. Okay. Whoever asked that questions for the letter of intent, you can see how this was initiated. And you can read here, because this is the initial case law as given for this letter of intent. Okay. So you can read that which is self-explanatory, because I'm going to read the summary. An expression in writing of a party's present intention to enter into a contract at a future date. This is the definition of letter of intent. An expression in writing of a party's present intention to enter into a contract at a future date. So see the next one, the purpose of letter of intent. Arrangement of resources. You can arrange, not doing the agreement, you can arrange. You can say the labor supplier, we are going to get one project. Okay, we have received the letter of intent. Once we sign the contract, we will let you know, but you can arrange, you can allocate some labors, not allocate, you can arrange some labors for like that. Labor, plant, subcontractor, suppliers, prepare the program, anticipated delay in finalizing the contract. If there is one more reason, if the contract is going, anticipating finalizing the contract, delay in finalizing the contract, they will issue the letter of intent, but in the content of the contract, it will be looks like a legally binding document. We cannot say, we cannot define from the heading. Okay, you have to read that content, what it is mentioned. Because some of the contracts are legally binding, but the heading like a letter of intent. I have seen in Dubai. Let us move to the bond, advance payment, performance security, retention, and parent company guarantee. The next one. What do you mean by bond? In general terms, a bond is an undertaking by one party known as a surety or guarantor addressed to another party known as a beneficiary or owner to do or to refrain from doing certain things. So you should know the meaning of that bond. The contractor in this arrangement is known as the principal. In the construction industry, bonds commonly take the form of the bank or insurer, promising to make a payment to the employer should the contractor default on his obligation under the contract. if the contractor default on his obligation, the insurer, the banker promising to make the payment to the employer should the contractor default on his obligation under the contract. The amount of money guaranteed by the bond will vary according to its type and employer requirement. Let us see the type of bond. There are 4 types of bond that may be encountered. Tender bond, sometimes known as a bid bonds. These are intended to provide security if the tenderer withdraws his tender within the tender period or refuses to accept the contract once awarded. You have to look into this slide because these kind of questions they are asking in the APC panels. What is the purpose of tender bond? Some people they call it a bid bonds. Okay, the purpose is these are intended to provide security if the tenderer withdraws his tender within the tender period or refuses to accept the contract once awarded, because the employer will have a security of that. He will encash. Okay. The next one, advance payment bonds. If the employer makes a substantial payment to the contractor in advance of the work being done, the contractor will be expected to provide a bond equal to the amount that he has received. Performance bond allow the employer to recover monies which are owed to him by the contractor in the event of contractor being in breach of his obligation under the contract. Because they might ask in the panel, APC panel, what is the purpose of providing the performance bond? Retention bond. In some ways, these are similar to advance payment bond. They are required to guarantee the contractor is making good defects where retention has been released early. The performance bond, before that one, the performance bond will usually be a fixed amount expressed as a percentage of the contract price. The usual figure is 10%. Generally, they call it, they are asking for the 10% of the accepted contract price. So the retention bond, in some ways, these are similar to advance payment bond. They are required to guarantee the contractors making good defects where retention has been released early. Okay. Now, advance payment. Red Book make provision for an advance payment as an interest-free loan. Although to oblige the employer to make an advance payment, the amount of the advance payment must be stated in the relevant contract document, whether as an amount or percentage of the accepted contract amount, along with the details of the number and timing of the installment, the recoveries, applicable currencies and proportion. So here I have given here FIDIC 99 Red Book, amount as per in appendix to tender, number and timing of installment as per appendix to tender, 14.7A1, which means if they didn't mention about the recovery installment numbers, one payment will be recovered. That is the 14.7A1. Applicable currencies and proportion in as per appendix to tender, prepayment amortization, clause 14.2, para 5. Payment required within later of 42 days after issuing the letter of acceptance or 21 days after receiving the performance security as per 4.2 and advance payment guarantee as per, there's a type not 9, as per 14.2 and 14.7A. This is all based on the FIDIC 99 Red Book. If the contract does not specify payment of the advance payment in installments by the employer, then by subclause 14.a, the advance payment is to be paid in a single installment. If they didn't mention about the number of installment and all, based on the FIDIC 1997 subclause 14.a, one time they will recover. The second one, the Red Book stipulate in the second paragraph of the subclause that the advance payment shall be made by the employer when only if the contractor submit a guarantee in accordance with the subclause 14.2 to provide security when the employer is paying a sum without obtaining the benefit of having any corresponding work completed. Sometimes they might ask in the APC panel question, how you will pay advance payment. So you have to say, he has to submit his performance security and advance payment guarantee and also reasonably mobilized at the site. And he has to submit the application of the advance payment. These four should be fulfilled. The Red Books require security by a guarantee. The guarantee is to be in amounts and currencies equal to the advance payment and issued by an entity and from with the country approved by the employer. The subclause require that the guarantee be in the form annexed to the particular conditional annex form approved by the employer. Generally, they will attach the specimen form for the advance payment guarantee, as well as performance bond and all, performance security also, they will provide the specimen form. And also the last one, the subclause require that the contractor to ensure that the guarantee is valid and enforceable until the advance payment has been repaid and contemplates that its amount may be progressively reduced by the amount repaid. What is the purpose of providing the advance payment? There are two purposes. To assist the contractor with cash flow at the outset of the project, where the initial outlay for the startup cost and design may be significant. If there is no advance payment, the contractor will have the negative cash flow in the initial stage because he has to spend some amount of money for the office setup and all. Okay, so if there is no advance payment, he will have the negative cash flow. So that is the first purpose the employer used to give this advance payment. The second one, to fund the procurement of plant and materials, long lead items. If there are any long lead items, employer will give the advance payment, the contractor will place the order for this long lead. These are the two purposes for that issuing the advance payment. Now let us move to the performance security. Because in the FIDIC says not performance bond, performance security. Subclause 4.2 provides for the option of requiring the contractor to provide a performance security to the employer. This subclause applies only if the amount of required security is stated in the relevant contract document. This is an option. Okay. Subclause apply only if the amount of the required security is stated in the relevant contract document. The performance security must be issued by an entity and from a country approved by the employer and in the form annexed to a particular condition in another form approved by the employer. Generally, they will attach the specimen form for this performance security. As per that, without any changing the wording, the contractor has to submit the performance security. If there is any wording change or they might change the clause or something like that, the employer will not accept. Okay, as per the specimen form, he has to submit the security. The amount the contractor is required to obtain the performance security in the amounts and currencies stated in the relevant contract amount. One gentleman asked what will be in the appendix to tender. As I said, the key details or elements, key information they will mention in the single page. They used to mention about this performance security as well. Okay, what is the percentage? They used to give 10% of the accepted contract price like that. They will mention in the appendix to tender. The key information, they will list it in the appendix to that tender. Generally, that will be a single one page. It is common for the amount to be specified either as a sum or as a percentage. Sometimes they will put as a sum. They will mention the amount. The example forms of performance equity included in the Red Book also include an optional provision for the amount, because they have given the example form in the Red Book, with the Red Book, FIDIC 99. Period. The contractor is required to deliver the performance security to the employer within 28 days after receiving the letter of acceptance. Sometimes they might ask this question, when your contractor has to submit the performance security, if the contractor didn't submit the performance security, will you pay the interim payment? Will you recommend the interim payment certificate? Like that they might ask. So you should be aware, you have to read your contract thoroughly. You should be familiar with your contract, what it says. So here, the contractor is required to deliver the performance security to the employer within 28 days after receiving the letter of acceptance. The contractor is required to ensure the performance security is valid and enforceable until he has executed and completed the works and remedying any defects. Performance security must be valid until the issue of the performance certificate. During the defect notification period as well, he has to maintain, and it should be enforceable. Return of performance security. Please read your contract thoroughly, because they will ask based on your submission. Whatever you have submitted to the RICS body, they will ask the question based on your submission as per your contract. So while you are answering, you have to mention as per my contract like this. Okay, but here whatever we are discussing, it is based on the FIDIC 99 Red Book and Qatar context. Okay, I am repeating again. So you should be thorough with your standard form of contract. Return of performance security. The employer is required to return the performance security within 21 days after receiving the copy of the performance certificate. Okay, the next one, retention. What is the purpose of keeping the retention? The objectives are to provide an incentive for the contractor to complete his obligation quickly and to give the employer some financial security if the contractor defaults. So this is the purpose of keeping the retention. So you are giving the employer some assurance during the defect lab notification period. He will do the remedy the defects. Okay, and also the employer, he wants to get that 5%. He will make sure his works, he will progress the works fast, and because he wants to get that 5% retention early. So that is the purpose. Parent company guarantee. Basically, where the contractor is a subsidiary of another larger company or group of companies, the employer may require the contractor procure a parent company guarantee which guarantee due performance. Basically, this will not have any monetary values. Okay, if there is a bigger, larger companies, the overseas companies, so otherwise Emirates to Emirates, they will ask, the employer will ask to give the parent company guarantee. Then the mother company, the main company, they will give the assurance to the employer if the event of any due performance, we will complete that project. So this parent company guarantee will not have any monetary value. This will give only for the performance of the is there any due performance of the contractor, he will give the undertaking. Assurance to the employer. They will step into that project and they will complete that, they will fulfill that employer requirements. Notably, the FIDIC condition do not contain any reference to the contractor obligation to provide a parent company guarantee. Let us move to the insurances. Generally, clause 18 as per FIDIC 99 set out the insurance that are required under the FIDIC 99 Red Book. These insurance can be broadly categorized. I have summarized these all insurances, okay, in this table. You can see here, you can read. They might ask, we will see there's a query also, the possible questions, okay. They might ask, could you please brief the insurance with the value and validity as per your contract? Like that, they might ask. These are the most popular possible questions. Here I have listed as per the FIDIC 99, I have summarized in this table. The first one, insurance for the works, clause 18.2. Insure the works, plant, material, contractor's documents for not less than the full reinstatement cost, including cost of demolition, removal of debris, and professional fees and profit. Validity until the date of issue of the TOC, taking over certificate, as per para 1. But it is also to be maintained until the date of issue of the performance certificate. The first paragraph, it says the contractor has to maintain, it should be the maintain until the date of TOC, as well as the para 2, it says to be maintained until the date of issue of the performance certificate. For example, insurance cover required for the works and contract equipment reduced. For example, initially, if the insurance is 100 million, once he received the taking over certificate, because he will continue that defect notification period, he can reduce that amount. He can agree, he can discuss with the employer as well as the engineer, and he can reduce the amount, let's say 10 million, because most of his obligation he fulfilled because he obtained the taking over certificate. So he can reduce. This is what says in the FIDIC 99 Red Book in para 2. The other one says the contractor equipment, same clause 18.2, some not less than full replacement value, including the delivered to site. This is what mentioned in the FIDIC 99 Red Book. And validity until any works are carried out. That's why I have segregated these two, because these two together they have mentioned in the FIDIC 99. I have segregated these two to differentiate this amount and validity. The other one, third party liability, clause 18.3, insure against damage to person properties which are not covered under subclause 18.2 and 18.4. Okay, amount stated appendix to the tender. Because as that gentleman asked, what are the information listed in the appendix to the tender, they will put third party liability, for example, 500,000, 1 million, 10 million, 5 million, like that they will mention. And the validity until the date of issue of the performance certificate. Okay, not the TOC, until the issue of performance certificate. The insurance for the contractor's personnel, workman compensation, this is must, everything is must. Clause 18.4, insurance against liability for claims, damages, losses and expenses, including legal fee and expenses arising from the injury, sickness, disease or death of person employed by the contractor, some sufficient to cover the liability. So the amount should be enough to cover the liability. And the validity until any persons are employed on the work. So I have summarized these insurances as per the FIDIC 99 Red Book. Okay, so you should be thorough with your contract. Okay, how they have mentioned what are the insurance are available. For example, this insurance for the works and equipment as per QP contract, very clearly it said that should be maintained until the issue of the discharge certificate. Okay, here they have given two stages. Once he can reduce, in the paragraph 2 it says he can reduce the insurance once he receives the TOC. Next, clause 18 only set out the minimum insurance required under the contract. In most instances, the parties may also wish to effect other insurances Example may be required by the applicable laws. Decennial liability insurance. As I said, explain, this is the reason I mentioned the contractual terms. We said express terms and implied terms. Okay. In some of the contract, I have come across this one in Qatar. One of the contract, they put one line item for the decennial liability insurance, and the contractor is suffered to obtain this insurance. Okay. Once you received like such kind of insurance, you have to approach with the insurance specialist prior to entering into the contract. So this is what I mentioned, the third point. The party should obtain the advice of insurance specialist prior to entering into the contract as to whether the insurance required by the contract is available and appropriate for the specific project. The insurance requirement do not alter the party's liabilities under the contract or otherwise. This is expressly recognized by subclause 18.1 because they have given general requirement. Subclause 18.1 is a general requirement. If one party fails to maintain the insurance, counterparty is entitled to take out insurance cover and recover the premiums. This one they used to ask in the APC question. For example, let's say if the contractor he does not take the insurance, how you will progress their payment, or how you will advise to the client, how you will advise to the employer. So employer can take the insurance and the premium he can deduct it from the interim payment. Okay, next, who is required to effect the insurance? Generally, the FIDIC forms assume that the contractor will be responsible for effecting and maintaining the insurance. However, in some instances, employer take third-party insurance, example, harbor, airport construction, due to liabilities more. This is because of the reason sometimes employers taking the third-party insurance. If it is a big project, harbor or airport project. If the employer is to effect and maintain any of these insurance, this should be stated in the particular condition and provide a copy of insurance. While he issuing the tender document, the ITT, he has to attach copy of that insurance and he has to notify to the tenderer. Then only sometimes the insurance also, he has to obtain the insurance cover from some companies for that below the deductibles. If he wants to cover that below the deductibles, he has to obtain some insurance. So he will keep and maintain, effect some insurance. Requirements for insurance to be effected. Subclause 18.1 contains the general requirement for the insurances that must be effected and maintained under clause 18. I think Sandesh, okay, video is on. The particular requirement regarding the scope, extent, amount, period, permitted exclusion and deductibles for the specific insurances are then set out in the subsequent subclauses, which variously require further information to be stated in the relevant contract document. So these are the requirements for the insurance to be effected. The next, approval of terms and insurer. Under subclause 18.1, if the contractor is to arrange the insurances, the insurer and the terms must be approved by the employer. If the employer is to arrange any insurance under the contract, the proposed insurance and general terms should be annexed to the particular condition. So these are just for the reminders, takeaways only. Okay, you should be aware, you should how the employer will approve, this engineer will approve this insurance and all. I'm just reminding the joint names. If a policy is required to indemnify joint insured, the cover shall apply separately to each insured and as though a separate policy had been issued for each of the joint insured. For policies required under the Red Book to be joint names, these are regulated by additional provision contained in the 4th paragraph of the subclause 18.1, which amongst other matters requires such policies to include cross-liability clause such that the cover applies separately to each insured as though a separate policy had been issued for each of the joint insured. Umbrella cover, employer take insurance for the works plus third party. If it is a large development, huge development, the employer will take the umbrella cover for the insurance for the work, because otherwise the contractor will include the price, tender price for these insurances. The employer will get the huge tender prices. That is the reason if it is a huge development and if he wants to add some packages later on, some packages, he will take the insurance for the works and third party. That is called umbrella cover. Cross liability, when insurance under both contractor and employer, damages to both parties are covered as if they are separately insured. Both parties can seek compensation for their individual losses. Subrogation, right of the insurance company to sue whoever is responsible for causing the loss to the insured. Indemnity insurance, all professionals owe a duty to the client to carry out their work with the proper care and may be liable to damages for negligence if they fail to do so. For this reason, professional indemnity should be obtained. These are the possible questions. They might ask, could you please brief the insurance with their value and validity as per your contract? So you should be thorough the insurances as per your contract. And the second one, if the contractor didn't take the insurances, what we will do? How would you advise your employer client? As I said, employer can take the insurance and he can reduce that premium from the interim payment application. How will you administer insurance claim? If there are any claims as per insurance, for example, leakage in the if it is a hotel, guest rooms, if there are any water leakage or something, it will be damaged the carpet and all, the parquet flooring and all. So you have to inform the insurance company, take police reports, photos, prepare insurance. The leakage will not cover that police reports, but you have to prepare the reports, photos, prepare incident report, submit claim with substantiation evidence, the quotation, calculation, etc. Let us move to the interim valuation and payment provision. Generally, the following item must be considered when valuing the work. Basically, we can say preliminaries. Preliminary is specific to site, specific to that particular site. Measured work contained in the bill of quantities, value of variations, value of nominated subcontractor and supplier work, material on or off-site where the contract permits, fluctuation in cost of labor, plant, materials where the contract permits, because some of the contract, they have disabled this one, the fluctuation. Okay, some of the contract they have allowed. Loss expenses, retention monies, previous payment. Now let us look at what FIDIC 99 Red Book says. Application for interim payment certificate. This is your bread and butter. You are familiar with this one. I have just highlighting here the key takeaways. So this is your day-to-day works as well. The payment process commences with the contractor submitting a statement to the engineer for processing. The contractor is generally submit 6 copies of the statement for, because these are all as per the FIDIC 99 Red Book. Okay, in practical you should be aware how many copies you are submitting and all. The default period is after the end of each month. The statement is to be approved, an approved form, and the contract requires that it. In the statement is to be an approved form. So in the detail, the amounts to the which contractor consider himself to be entitled, and accompanied by supporting documents, including the relevant reports required under the subclause 4.2. You can see here the upper portion, each of the monthly or the otherwise interim payment. Contractor submit the statement to the engineer. Within 28 days, engineer issue interim payment certificate to the employer. Then within 56 days from the submission of the interim payment by the contractor, employer has to pay. This is what mentioned in the FIDIC 99. Okay, employer makes the payment to the contractor within 56 days from the submission of the contractor submission. Okay, the down portion about the final payment. Okay, contractor submit the draft final statement to the engineer. Engineer verify statement. Contractor submit the information. Contractor submit final statement and the discharge. Okay, if it is within 20 days, then engineer issue the final payment certificate. Okay, everything is perfect. There is no dispute or anything. Then he will submit. So here they have given the timeline. So you have to look into your contract, how they have given the time frame for this payment. Actually, we have a few more minutes. I think, yeah, 9 minutes remaining. I thought of completing this interim valuation. Unfortunately, we couldn't finish this one. I will continue from some of the slides because I have prepared 62 slides. Now we are in 51. Okay, let us see until within this 10 minutes. I have received around 51 questions. Actually, better to keep these questions and we will discuss on the end of the second session coming Saturday. And if you have any, if you need any more clarity on whatever I have said, you can ask. Okay, we will discuss. That will be the for our discussion for the questions. Okay. At the end of each month, submit monthly statement in respect to value of the permanent works executed, any other items in the BOQ, equipment, temporary works, the material on no offsite, percentage listed as stated in the appendix to tender, any other sum, variation claims, etc. Because I have summarized, these are the main content should be included in the interim valuation. Once upon receipt of the statement, deliver interim payment certificate to employer subject to retention, and the consultant gives, he will do the retention and the advance recovery and deduction other than LD. Liquidated damages you can notify to the employer, but you cannot make any deduction in the payment certificate. You don't have any authority or rights to deduct in the payment certificate, but you can notify, advise to the employer. The employer has a discretion to deduct from this payment. Okay. Cost of insurance affected by the employer. If the employer has taken any insurance, so he can deduct. These are the deductions you can do from the payment certificate. Schedule of payments. Some of the contract having some milestone payments each and every stages. So especially they have given this. I have summarized this for the schedule of payments. If it is applicable in the contract, you have to do schedule of payments. Generally, this is for the milestone payments for the design stages or some of the documents. I think we will stop because these little bit, we have to, these are few questions they might ask in this section. So I don't want to run through fast. So we will stop here, okay, in the 53. We will continue from this one on coming Saturday, and I will cover the remaining study checklist as well. Let us see a few questions. As per your experience, what is the major difference in clause between Qatar general condition of conduct and FIDIC Red Book condition? Actually, you have to thorough because I have an experience with the QP contract as well as FIDIC contracts. FIDIC 87, 99 as well as 2017. I have an experience. I didn't work with the 2017, but I have some knowledge. But I have the QP contract only. So you have to read, compare and contrast for the major clauses. Sorry, I didn't clear the next question. Sorry, I didn't clearly mention there is no amount in the BOQ for the dewatering, no unit price or lump sum. It was excluded before signing the contract. They just agreed to remove from the exclusion. Okay. I don't know how they have drafted this condition that you have to read as per your contract. If the employer terminates the lump sum contract, how the final invoice will be evaluated, we will discuss under the termination the next session. Is there a contractor has right to claim for the arrangement of resources based on the received LOI in case if contract agreement going to delay or lose of the contract in future? No, he cannot claim. This is what I mentioned because this is not a legally binding contract document, and also we cannot define, we have to see what are the content included in that letter of intent. Based on that, we can discuss. How much feasible or risk to receive performance check guarantee instead of performance bond? Generally, no one will accept the check because the subcontractors, if they close the account, we don't know because bank will notify to us he has closed the account. So once he closed the account, generally they will not accept the checks for the performance instead of performance bond. What is the purpose of keeping the performance security and retention until issuance of performance certificate? As I said, you should know the purpose of giving the performance security and retention. I have mentioned in my slide, you can just read it. What is the performance of the performance security? I have explained earlier, and also I have mentioned in the what do you call in the slides. If the contract amount, if the amount of default or damage more than the retention money, how the client will fix the defect and default? Can client liquidate the performance bond? Performance bond is a different, the defect. If there is a default of the defects, the termination default, then he can encase that performance bond. Can we get this PPT for study purpose? Actually, we will share this video and we will upload this video into our LinkedIn group, the MEXA Middle East Quantity Service Association. And also we will circulate this one in our WhatsApp group. Okay, thank you very much. We will wind up today, and we will see you next Saturday.